Albrecht Dürer's 1508 woodcut print, Christ Expelling the Moneylenders, depicts what is frankly a disturbing scene. Having come to the temple in Jerusalem and found it full of vendors and pseudo-bankers, Christ has turned over their tables. Frightened people are fleeing to the left and right. Christ stands over a man who has already fallen to the ground and appears to be whipping him. This is a subject of great turmoil. However, Dürer succeeds in translating the chaos of this narrative into a visual energy that actually draws the viewer into the image. Standing close to the foreground, the figure of Christ fills much of the page. In his treatment of Christ's robe, Dürer's visual language is particularly effective in developing the composition's structure. Activated by the movement of Christ's body, his clothing becomes a visual storm of crisscrossing lines and conflicting areas of light and shadow. While Dürer's subject may visually startle and perhaps even repel the viewer, the structure of his composition spiritually connects that same viewer to Christ. The previous video, in this series on his devotional narrative images, investigated how Dürer's approach to printmaking cultivated his development of an agile vocabulary of printed lines. We noted how Dürer was able to use these lines to simultaneously depict a subject and to create a composition. In Christ Expelling the Moneylenders, we can see the application of Dürer's process. This work both critiques certain church practices and simultaneously rewards the pious viewer's desire to imitate Christ. To help unpack how Dürer's Christ Expelling the Moneylenders makes the sacred more immediately present for the viewer, we should define two terms: the picture and the print. The picture is the narrative subject depicted. The print is the material means by which the subject is depicted. The picture is an illusion composed of figures in action, specifically Christ expelling merchants and moneylenders from the temple. Dürer's print is composed of lines of ink printed on paper. In this devotional narrative image, Dürer demonstrates how a carefully nurtured relationship between the depicted subject and the material means of depiction potentially generates layers of sacred meaning. Dürer's Christ Expelling the Moneylenders was part of a series of 37 devotional prints that art historians call the Small Passion. Dürer's Christ's entry into Jerusalem, which we looked at in a previous video, was also a part of the Small Passion. In fact, within the Small Passion, Christ Expelling the Moneylenders is the page that immediately follows Christ's entry into Jerusalem. What we should note here is, Dürer's Christ Expelling the Moneylenders is not an isolated print image. It was designed to be read within a sequence of devotional narrative images. Furthermore, when these 37 devotional prints were bound together as a book, the Small Passion also included text. This text, commissioned by Dürer to accompany each image, contributes to a historical and theological context in which Christ Expelling the Moneylenders can be interpreted. As a Christian and artist working on the eve of the Protestant Reformation, Dürer was deeply concerned with the question of the proper use of art in worship. This was a time in Christian history when there was a great deal of controversy, especially in what is today Germany, over the potential idolatrous use of images, as well as other contemporary abuses of the Catholic Church. These abuses included the sale of indulgences that promised to reduce a person's time in purgatory. Furthermore, some of these church abuses also had a corrupting effect on the uses of the visual arts. Therefore, Christ Expelling the Moneylenders not only depicted a past biblical event, it also addressed a contemporary theological issue that was important to Dürer as a Christian and an artist. The Small Passion was, as far as we know, a project initiated by Dürer himself. Therefore, we can presume that these images evidence his own thinking and they may even have served Dürer as a means of working out his own faith in troubled times. After completing the print images, Dürer commissioned his humanist friend, Benedictus Celadonius, to write a text to accompany each image. The text would be printed on the reverse side of the preceding image, and therefore be on the facing page of the bound book. The text for Christ expelling the moneylenders criticized the sale of indulgences. The fact that the small passion preceded Martin Luther's 95 Theses by at least 8 years suggests how both the sale of indulgences and the perversion of the proper devotional use of the visual arts were already a personal concern of Dürer's. However, Christ expelling the moneylenders was not only a criticism of deceitful religious practices. Dürer simultaneously aimed to invigorate the presumed Christian viewer's relationship with Christ. Reading Dürer's composition, starting from the lower left, the viewer is almost immediately caught up in the visual frenzy of Christ's action. Through the structure of lines, Dürer draws the viewer towards Christ's face. The circular form of Christ's arm and the whip that he wields creates a sort of visual whirlpool that attracts and holds the viewer's attention. As a devotional narrative image, Dürer's Christ expelling the moneylenders visually fosters a direct spiritual connection between the viewer and Christ. This reading of Dürer's image returns us to the relationship between the picture and the print. While the picture depicts Christ's destruction of one type of religious practice, the print advances an alternative practice of Christ-oriented personal piety. The composition's foregrounding of Christ encourages a private devotion in which the visual arts have a proper and vital role in encouraging and instructing faith. Dürer's image could be understood as his statement concerning the role of the visual arts within that devotional practice. While all of Dürer's Passion series were created for private devotional use, the Small Passion was especially designed for the layperson. This image suggests how the cure for church abuses could be found in a return to a focus on Christ himself. In fact, in the context of the Reformation, this work could be read as Christ clearing away all of the impediments for those who would desire a more pious and personal engagement with him. Created during a pivotal moment in Christian history, one that would produce the Protestant Reformation, Dürer's Christ expelling the moneylenders could be read as a critique of what Dürer considered to be false church practices. But Dürer doesn't leave the viewer in a state of confusion. This print, and the whole of the Small Passion, cultivates a spiritual intimacy with Christ. In this Small Passion series, Dürer radically expands the narrative of Christ's Passion. In order to focus the viewer on Christ's suffering, Passion narratives traditionally begin either with the Last Supper or Christ's agony in the garden, and end with the resurrection. Beginning instead with Adam and Eve, and ending with the Last Judgment, Dürer's Small Passion situates Christ's death and resurrection within a much larger history of humanity. In that context, Christ expelling the moneylenders can be read as a narrative of redemptive destruction. Here, the removal of fraudulent religious practices creates the possibility for grace. We see this grace offered at the Last Supper, which is the page that immediately follows Christ expelling the moneylenders. Examining what Dürer's art might have meant within his own historical context does not take away from what this work can mean for the contemporary viewer. Great art transcends the era of its creation. The dynamic forms and fluid lines of this devotional narrative image can still spiritually inspire.